Hello and welcome to World Talks. I'm your host, Diana Skaya. 30 years after the Srebrenica genocide, the wounds in Bosnia and Herzegovina remain open. Now, over 8,000 Bosniak men and boys were executed by Bosnian Serb forces. And while international courts have ruled the 1995 massacre a genocide, political divisions across the country persist. Today, families are still searching for remains, and some leaders still deny the massacre ever took place. To discuss this and more, and how Srebrenica continues to shape the region's politics and memory, I'm joined by Konstanty Gebert, former correspondent in the Balkans, an eyewitness to the war in former Yugoslavia. Konstanty, thank you so much for being with us here this evening on World Talks. Now,
thanks for having me.
First and foremost, Konstanty, I hear you were there. What did you personally witness? What marked you the most during your time there? Some memories that you want to share from the most important ones to the most tragic ones, and do tell us how that unfolded in Srebrenica and how did this tragedy come to pass?
I was there with Tadeusz Mazowiecki, the former Polish Prime Minister, who was the UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights. And as soon as we got the first notices of the massacre, Mazowiecki wanted to interview survivors. The UN was against it. The situation was very unstable. They were concerned for his safety. Eventually, we made it to Tuzla, the biggest town on the Bosnian government side of the front line. And from there, Mazowiecki was to visit a refugee camp of refugee women from Tuzla. And the UN planned it as a military operation. They were literally afraid that the refugees might physically harm us because Srebrenica had, after all, been a UN safe zone, and it was under the UN flag that it was massacred. And when we drove into this tent camp on the outskirts of the city, the hatred in reaction to our UN banners was palpable. And first, a bunch of Swedish MPs dropped out from their lorry and created defensive perimeter. And then Mazowiecki started to scramble out of his car very slowly. And somebody recognized him and yelled, "It's not the UN, it's Mazowiecki." And the Swedes could go smoke their cigs. And people lined up to deliver to Mazowiecki their testimony. He had their absolute trust. And that very same evening, he made up his mind to resign as UN Human Rights Rapporteur because he said, "I cannot pretend I can defend human rights under the UN banner." That was dramatic, painful. I think he made the right decision. Only after the fact did we learn that he was the first high-ranking UN official ever in the organization's history to resign in protest against the UN. Others just swallowed their frogs and went on. He didn't. He has my deepest respect for that.
That's quite a story, and I'm sure you have definitely more to tell. Konstanty, let me ask you this now. 30 years after the war, Serbs living in Bosnia, they are becoming increasingly nationalistic, if we can say. Their leaders are sending signals that they don't want a shared state with Croats, with Muslims. Why do you think that nationalism is on the rise again? Is it safe to say, to call it as such?
It never disappeared. And the state structure that we constructed, we being the international community for Bosnia, was tailor-made to foster nationalism. Bosnia was carved up into two entities, the Serb Republic and the Muslim Croat Federation. All government positions were to be distributed according to the ethnic key. The clear message was that ethnicity trumps citizenship, ethnicity trumps anything else. So we, the democratic international community, created for Bosnia a state structure which was guaranteed to foster, strengthen, and encourage nationalism. In 2008, if the memory serves me, the chairman of the Jewish community in Sarajevo, Jakica Finci, decided to run for president because many of his friends across political divides and ethnic divides considered him an extremely viable candidate. And when he went to the electoral office to register, he was asked, well, do you register as a Serb, as a Croat, or as a Muslim? And Jakica says, I'm Jewish. And the official answered, well, that's your private business, but in order to run, you have to run as a representative of the Serbs, of the Muslims, or of the Croats. So how do you register? So he didn't register. He went back home and encouraged a friend of his, a Roma activist, also to try, and he went through the same rigmarole. He was supposed to declare himself Serb, Muslim, or Croat. And so Bosnia is the only state in Europe, in fact, the only state in the democratic world, where a Jew or a Rom cannot run for president unless they renounce their ethnic identity. The stupidity of that is self-evident. In fact, the Council of Europe referred the case to the European Tribunal of Human Rights, which ruled that Bosnia needs to amend its constitution to make it possible for anybody to run without having to disguise their ethnic identity. And this was referred back to the Bosnian parliament. The parliament was in total agreement. Yes, we need to reform the constitution, except that the Bosniak and the Croat members of parliament wanted to transform the constitution to make Bosnia a more unitary state, and the Serbs wanted to transform the constitution to secede. We're still stuck. A Jew or a Rom still can't run for president. But this is not the work of Bosnian nationalists. This is the constitution that was drafted for Bosnia by leading legal experts from the democratic community, from the US, from Europe. It's our legacy.
Constante, let me ask you briefly before I move on and I shift to another topic. Just briefly, can you tell me what responsibility here does the international community bear, and what lessons should the international community have actually learned from its, if we can say, failure in Srebrenica?
Well, first of all, we should never make promises that we're not willing to deliver. Srebrenica in 1995 had absolute guarantees of safety. If the Serbs were to attack, NATO would almost automatically launch air raids against the attackers. When the Serbs first attacked, the UN outpost at Srebrenica sent a report to headquarters in Zagreb demanding NATO intervention. The report was rejected because it was faxed on the wrong form. I'm not making this up. We definitely did not want to intervene. We were willing to let the Serbs butcher the Muslims, which happened. And by doing so, we convinced Bosnian Muslims, and I believe many other Muslims worldwide, that we cannot be trusted, that the democratic community is a sham. I remember speaking with Mustafa Ceric, the Rais Ulema, the spiritual leader of the Bosnian Muslims, who said that Europe is simply doing its ethnic cleansing through Serb hands. They want to get to rid the continent of Muslims. And I said that I think that that's an overstatement. And the Rais Ulema answered, so make a mental experiment. Imagine that you had a Bosnian Muslim army besieging Belgrade for 3 years, bombing the churches, burning the museums, raping the women, killing the children, Do you also think that Europe would have sat on its hands and done nothing? Touché. If it was Muslims slaughtering Christians, we would have had European intervention within a month.
Right.
As it was Christians slaughtering Muslims, we let be.
Constante,
this is something we can never forget.
Now, for their efforts to end the war in Bosnia, U.S. President at the time Bill Clinton and U.S. envoy to Bosnia Richard Holbrooke were among the nominees for the 1996 Nobel Peace Prize. Ultimately, José Ramos Horta and Carlos Felipe Jiménez Bello were awarded for their prize to bring peace to East Timor. Now, in this context, I want to ask, how do you assess Donald Trump's nomination for the Nobel Peace Prize? What's your take on that?
Well, I would say it doesn't strike me as sensible to deliver the award before whatever the award is supposed to be returned for is done. Even if President Trump has the highest hopes and best intentions to create peace in the world, he hasn't. He's already been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize by the authorities of Pakistan, who maintain that he played a crucial role in negotiating a cessation of hostilities between Pakistan and India this spring. India, however, says that it knows nothing of President Trump's participation. To give President Trump a peace prize for a very successful and probably necessary war he has waged would be a travesty.
All right, Konstanty, now in really under 1 minute, maximum 1 minute, because we're almost out of time here, I just want to ask you about the recent events by far-right Polish MEP Grzegorz Braun denying the existence of gas chambers in Auschwitz and the situation that unfolded. Now, what do you make of the situation? And most importantly, my question to you is the following. Why do you think over 1 million Poles actually voted for someone with openly anti-Semitic views? In 1 minute, please.
Well, apparently they share those views. According to research by Professor Michał Bilewicz, 24% of the Poles believe in ritual murder. That is something that he said that actually happens. And as to the gas chambers in Auschwitz, it was a long time ago, and anyway, it wasn't us. The problem with Braun is not his totally outrageous statements. It is the toleration he enjoys from state authorities. If you do not react to that, you encourage. And the state authorities, out of fear of alienating right-wing voters before our recent presidential elections, had chosen not to react to earlier law-breaking by Mr. Braun, and they have encouraged him. The responsibility is theirs, and the ball is in their part of the field.
Thank you so much, Constante Gebert, former correspondent in the Balkans and eyewitness to the war in former Yugoslavia, for all your input and insight into all these important topics today. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
And that completes this edition of World Talks here on TVP World. I'm Diana Skaya. Thanks for watching.